So we could have had a wonderful childhood with no trauma, but maybe we have learned either from our family or our culture or religion, hey, it's not good to complain, or you must put everybody first, or anger is bad. And so these become organizing principles. And so if we don't want to put someone first, but we do, we're fragmenting. Or if we feel angry, but we don't express it, we're fragmenting in order to engage safely in the world.
Welcome to yourbrilliance.com. I'm your host, Amy Waterman. Have you ever felt like the person you are to the world, somebody who has it all together, somebody who knows exactly what she's doing, is not at all who you are on the inside? People would probably freak out if they could look inside you and see what you were really feeling. You only look calm and confident on the outside, but on the inside, sometimes it's like your emotions are all over the place. And you don't get why, because you've done the work on yourself. You've done the self-help and the therapy and the retreats. And none of that seems to have changed anything. You still feel like a mess half the time. So what's going on? Well, our guest for today might be able to help. Natalia Rachel is the director of Soma Clinic, an integrated health clinic based in Singapore. She specializes in trauma recovery, looking at the ways that trauma can manifest in complex health conditions. She combines talk and touch therapies to make her clients feel safer, more connected, and more whole. Welcome, Natalia.
Thanks for having me.
So, trauma recovery sounds so abstract. What does it actually look like in practice?
I think trauma recovery happens in our daily lives, and it's very multidimensional in nature. And what you expressed in your beautiful intro just then is all about fragmentation. And when we do experience trauma, what happens is that there are all these responses that are not safe enough for us to have. So we may feel angry and we may want to express either verbally or physically, and we don't because it's not safe to. Or we may feel terrified and we have to put on a brave face to get through it. Or we may feel so sad and in such need of a cuddle, but we daren't ask because it's not safe. So what happens is we fragment in order to survive, and we end up adopting this, I call it an external shell, and it's the personality that we create in order to interface with the world. And what we do is we pack away all of these parts of ourselves because it's too dangerous to allow them to express. And for many of us, that creates this split between how we interact with the world and how we feel inside. And so many of us can go along life with this experience of fragmentation. And of course, it's a spectrum. So there's different levels depending on the level of danger or the period of danger that we've gone through. And we walk around with this fragmented self. And so part of the trauma recovery process is to make it safe enough to identify all of these suppressed parts of us. And these suppressed parts have emotions, they have things they never got to say, they have needs that were never met, and they have a requirement to express now so that they can integrate. So part of the recovery process is identifying these and basically giving them time and space to be, and giving them a lot of love and care. So that's a big part of it. And one other part of it is finding increased safety in our bodies and in our relationships. Because in the case of relational trauma, it has often changed the way that we relate to other people and the world. So part of the process is about starting to be aware of that and noticing our triggers and our relating patterns and starting to challenge them and save them. But this takes awareness and safety and a lot of ups and downs, actually.
What I'm thinking of is that sometimes we can have this fragmented self, even if nothing has actually happened to us. I think about when we go off to work, we can't afford to have emotions like anger or frustration or even joy, because being a professional self requires stamping down the emotions you feel throughout the day. As a parent, you can't afford to go in front of your kid and show your kid all your doubts and your fears and your frustrations. You've got to present the calm, serene mother. And even in your relationships, I know so many women who worry that if they allow their partner to see how needy they feel, how much they just want some support, that their neediness will drive him away. So is it true that just the act of everyday living can create trauma?
Well, I wouldn't say trauma, but fragmentation. Yes. So not everything is trauma. You're right. So we are all fragmented. It's normal. When it becomes a problem is when it's affecting the way we live and breathe in our life. So maybe it can affect us physically, or it can cause mental health issues, or it can cause issues in the way we relate. And our fragmentation, I guess, if it's not addressed, does deepen over time. So we could have had a wonderful childhood with no trauma, but maybe we have learned either from our family or our culture or religion, hey, it's not good to complain, or you must put everybody first, or anger is bad. And so these become organizing principles. And so if we don't want to put someone first, but we do, we're fragmenting. Or if we feel angry, but we don't express it, we're fragmenting in order to engage safely in the world. So absolutely, it is not necessarily a response to trauma. I guess because I work with trauma, that's often what I'm looking at. And it's at one end of the spectrum. The other end is what we call misattunement. And so it's just about perhaps not having our needs met or being heard and seen as a child. But that is not trauma. That is most of us.
So, what I think about here is we often think that the solution to that feeling of not being heard is simply to talk. We go to a therapist, we go to a trusted loved one, and we talk about what happened and we understand what happened. And that's supposed to heal us because now we've been heard. But that isn't quite how it works, is it?
Well, I can only share from my perspective, both in my own recovery and working with clients. And I think talking is really important and making sense is really important. But what I commonly see is people have done all this amazing work on themselves and they've gone to therapy or they've done all these beautiful therapies. But what hasn't changed is the feeling. So it's kind of like, well, I cognitively know why I've had this experience, but I still feel a certain way that I'm wanting to change and I can't shift. And this is because a lot of our experience is non-verbal. So actually verbal communication is only pretty new to us humans. And in terms of the way we experience physiologically first. So actually in our nervous system, there are thousands and thousands of neuroreceptors that are constantly picking up information. So right now, the room you're in, the lights, the colors, the sounds, they're all being sent through your nervous system for integrated processing. And they go up to the brain for that processing, and then signals are sent back through the body. And that's when we have thoughts and emotions, and that's when we respond or react, depending on what our nervous system is telling us. And so when we do look at processing experience, I find it's really important to look at the physiological or somatic narrative that's going on. And when we have experienced trauma, or even if we've just had this kind of very misattuned upbringing, what can happen is this split between what's happening in the body and what's happening in the mind. So we tend to orient here, and we have this very mental, verbal narrative, but we miss what's going on here. We've kind of been taught to do that. And in the case of trauma, actually it's not safe to feel what's going on here. So part of the work when we come to a somatic approach is bringing our awareness into the body, into the story that's there somatically, and seeing what's going to emerge. And if you connect that idea to fragmentation, we might have been incredibly terrified. And, in the wild, when an animal is terrified, it's likely going to freeze. And then when the danger passes, it's going to shake. And after a bit of shaking, actually it's discharged the danger response and it's fine and it's on its merry way again. But in the case of trauma and sometimes misattunement, we do not allow our body that discharge because it's not safe for us to do so. And also I think as humans, we don't know that we should and that it's a good thing. So we end up holding a lot. And we can hold other things like emotions, and they all present somatically. So every emotion has a somatic signature. And so part of the process is coming in to feel, well, what happened to me somatically in my body, and how does it connect up to this story? and what does my body need to do or say or express that it never did.
That is amazing. So I want to know, what ways then do you see when clients come to you with health issues that are related to trauma? What kind of health issues are manifesting?
So what we see at the clinic is a lot of syndromal or complex conditions. So they're usually presenting with a number of symptoms that either are not improving with sort of medical help or are kind of unexplainable in nature. So it could range from autoimmune conditions to neurophysiological conditions. So something like migraines, autoimmune type stuff, chronic pain, fibromyalgia are common ones. I view that all illness, whether it's physical or mental health, so that's another thing. A lot of people come with anxiety or depression or extreme mood dysregulation. And usually with the physical symptoms, there is a mental health experience. And with the mental health symptoms, there is a physical experience. Just sometimes we're not able to mentally connect the two.
So basically what happens then is when people come to you, they have a lot of unexplained medical conditions. They seem to have a lot. And so they've also, I know that you are the last resort for so many clients. They have come to you because they've seen doctor after doctor after doctor. And yet, despite all of these various medical health conditions they come to, you don't then tackle, okay, we're going to tackle your autoimmune and we're going to tackle this and you're going to tackle that. You actually look for some very simple solutions. Do your clients ever seem surprised that it can all be boiled down to a trauma response or, some more basic fundamental cause than all these little bits?
Well, I wouldn't say surprised, but I would say they can feel incredibly relieved. So when I'm connecting to a client, I'm actually listening to their story, and that's the foundation of our work at Soma Clinic. Is that we know you're coming with all these health symptoms, but we want to know what happened to you before to cause these, because we don't just wake up sick one day. We don't just wake up with a mental health condition or with an autoimmune condition. We're existing in this forward motion. So we always want to hear the story. So there can be a huge relief just to be asked, tell me a story, what's happened to you. And it can cause just a release, just to feel like, hey, someone's listening to me, someone's caring for me, which is usually part of the problem in the first place. The other thing that can come up is people can sometimes feel pretty angry about it. So if they've been on a long journey for a long time trying to find help, and I know that this is my personal experience too, it's like, well, I've gone through 10 years or 5 years or however of trying to figure out how come no one asked me these things before? How come no one joined the dots for me before? So there can be a mixed response.
So walk us through that process then that you use with clients. So you start out asking for their story, then what do you do next?
Yeah, so I spend quite a bit of time listening to a client, what's happening for them now, what are the emotions, what are the core beliefs, and what are the triggers, and what are the other symptoms emerging. And then I'm going to find and link the dots to what's happened before. And for my clients, usually there is an experience of trauma. So we're going to find awareness of what's happening. We're going to identify what's happening in the nervous system, because in the face of trauma, our body kind of gets locked into a danger response. And there are 3 different main danger responses. So there's fight or flight, which is more related to like anxiety and distress, and it's very fast in its feeling. There is freeze or shutdown, which is more commonly associated to depression and slowness and apathy. And then there is a co-activation, which is actually very common with trauma, where it's actually both of those things either occurring at once, or it's like we're flipping between. So either we're depressed or we're anxious, we're happy, we're sad, we've got so much energy or no energy at all. So I'm going to listen to what's happening there, and then I'm going to ask myself, well, what do you need from me to feel safe to come out of that danger response? And I'm going to approach it really relationally. And I'm also going to consider if there were origins of trauma. What was the traumatic or harmful relationship? Did that person never get a chance to express their anger or their fear, or were they neglected and they need extra care and quiet? So I'm going to think very relationally. And after we talk, we do some work on the table, and it's always different on the table. So sometimes I'm simply providing an experience of calm and co-regulation, and helping them know somatically through my soma, through my body, actually you're very, very safe. And that can turn off a danger response. And sometimes it can lead directly into experiencing an emotion or a thought or a memory that wasn't safe to before. And other times we're working with more intention. So if we know that certain terrible things happened and there are certain unhelpful, suppressed emotions and beliefs, we're actually going to be searching with intention and direction in the body for how those might be manifesting and see if we can allow them to discharge. So it's quite an intricate process, and it's different for every single person because we're all so unique.
So how do clients change then as a result of it? What do you see when you see a client versus when they came in and then when they walk out after a session?
So number one is that they do not feel isolated and alone anymore. And that's a huge part of living with trauma or fragmentation. We just feel trapped inside ourselves. So that changes. There's usually a shift in the nervous system. So there's an experience of being a lot safer inside. There's a huge amount of increased awareness. And for some people, the body can feel very different if there has been a process of release that occurs, which is very common in this work. So people can walk out with pretty big changes. And I have seen people's physical symptoms shift. And I have seen people find a way to manage their anxiety or feel a little less depressed. I do also place a focus on giving tools for self-care, because I really think it's in daily life where the changes start to happen, because we can see the world with a new awareness and then we can start to consciously respond to it differently. And the other thing that is very clearly a byproduct of this work is that people's relational patterns seem to improve. So once we're kind of more aware of ourselves and once we can answer, why am I like this, then we can start to behave differently. And yeah, it's very common for my clients to be able to understand their husbands better or their children better and be less triggered. And because we exist so much within dynamic, when we start to shift, the other person on the end of the relationship shifts. So it's a beautiful byproduct of the work.
And you also offer online courses. You offer them for patients, for practitioners, for parents. And to get our viewers started, you're offering a very special gift. It's a 3-part video series on fragmentation.
Yeah, so it's called Our Fragmented Selves, and it's really just designed to help you connect to this concept a bit more deeply and promote some self-inquiry, because I always think once we start to ask ourselves questions and have these little illuminations, that's when change can start to occur.
Now, for those of you watching, if you want to get a sense of just how valuable this free gift is, go on over and see some of Natalia's work in action on her YouTube channel. I'm going to put a link to that below. It's well worth a few minutes of your day, and it's a very, very peaceful place to spend some time. So go check that out, and then don't forget to get your free gift. You can get it using this link. Just go to yourbrilliance.org/Natalia. That's yourbrilliance.org/Natalia. And you will need to enter a special code, and we're going to include that in the link, and we will also include that below. Thank you so much, Natalia, for coming onto the show. And I wondered if you had any last message you would like to leave our viewers with.
I think the overarching message I want to share is actually there is nothing wrong with you. When you are experiencing this disconnect and this external internal self, there's nothing wrong with you. There's just this fragmentation, and we can work on it.
Thank you so much. And thank you out there for watching. Now, did you have any aha moments or insights while watching this interview? If so, share them with us in the comments. And for more interviews like these, make sure to subscribe to Your Brilliance TV here on YouTube. And then come on over to yourbrilliance.com for more tips and insights on how you can live your most brilliant life. See you next time.